Welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining me. It's Alex here from Shop Before Podcast to talk about our next topic of discussion, which is now called I Know What You Know, or I Guess I Do. This is for all those people that need help but refuse to ask for it, don't like the fact that some of their peers might know something that they don't know. So they don't want to ask how they got to where they got, or don't want to ask the information to answer their problem that they themselves have had. So there are a lot of people out there that feel that they're dumbed down if they ask a question that they think they should have known. So they would rather pretend not to know. So when you see that they show interest in something that you might be doing, and you ask them if they need any help, the first response is, I don't need any help. I'm fine. So rather than asking something that could save them heaps of time, so that way when they do come to the dramas of trying to figure out how you manage to solve a problem, they want to figure it out themselves because they figure that's a bigger person to figure it out themselves, rather than a bigger person willing to ask for help would be the right way of doing things, because they can save time, and even once they get to the end result, then they can work out what they got wrong, what they should have done, to get to the steps that they needed to get to. But a lot of people feel they're afraid to ask for help. They figured they should know something more than you know, purely because they feel that they're smarter than you. And by not knowing something, they see that as they're lacking something. They're lacking the knowledge, rather than that they didn't have that question in their head, and you've been dealing with it for a lot longer than they have. So they would rather think that they can figure out what you did in an instant, rather than where you've done your homework to figure something out. So they would rather struggle with evolving than actually asking the question of how did you get there, and maybe then they can learn from you. But they themselves would prefer to learn only from themselves. Now, the funny thing about that is, even looking at the leaders that run the country, when they're making decisions, they've got advisors. They're not knowing everything themselves, and they ask the people that are best in a certain field to give them the advice that they then have to determine what's the right thing to do. So without advisors, without advice, they wouldn't get to half the answers they've come across. So everyone needs advice, whether you're young or old. Everyone has knowledge, and that you might not know, purely because it's been more of a focus of their interest. So if you're someone who's going to turn down knowledge just because it's not coming from your own learnings, you're lacking yourself. You're lacking knowledge yourself, and you're just doing harm to yourself. It's more of a hindrance to yourself, because I see it that everyone has a kind of knowledge that you yourself can pick up on, and the more people you talk to, the more you expand your brain and the more you grow. It's almost as a way of getting to a better version of yourself, because if you could speak to everyone and learn one thing, you've learned a whole lot more than you would ever learn on your own. I mean, as a community, we learn from each other, from the community. So if you want to shut yourself into a hermit and feel that you can do things yourself, you're only going to be getting the knowledge from yourself rather than from the people around you. Whether you're a child who goes to school and learns from the teacher, or your friends, whether you're an adult who's learning on the job, we all learn from people. That's part of growing. It's part of having a society that evolves. Now, if we disregards people's knowledge because we don't like them, or because we don't want to admit they know something we don't, we're basically making ourselves into hermits and childlike sort of stubbornness that refuses to allow themselves to learn from everyone, whether you like someone or not, or whether they're younger than you or not. Everyone has something to give, and if you just keep yourself open, ignore the fact that your bias towards someone, or the fact that someone might be younger than what you are, if you disregard some useful content, you're missing out from a vast knowledge that could enhance your own lifestyle. So some people don't want to learn from the opposite sex because they figured that they should be smarter, they should know something, know better. But I think you shouldn't put any restrictions to whether you learn from anyone. By putting restrictions, all you're doing is putting barriers up from knowledge. So there's so much knowledge out there, and you might know a lot more than someone, but it doesn't mean you know everything. We try and feel like we are professionals in every field, but the more you do that, the more narcissistic you become, because it does mean that you will not listen truly when people speak, and constantly need reminders of conversations you've had in the past because you never really listened in the first place. It's probably why that person would tell you the same thing over and over again, but you've only taken 10% of what they've said, purely because you figured that it wasn't worth your time. That's why you get some people who have to hear the same thing over and over again just to get the point. Whereas if you do get to speak to someone who doesn't have any bias and who's going to listen to you in the entirety, will take in what you say a lot better and won't be asking you to repeat yourself over and over again, because they're not worried about who's saying the information, but more about what's been said and taking in what they think is important or not. But if have got bias towards where you get that information from, you're only half listening to them. You're only giving them one of your ears and ignoring the other stuff. It's really going from one ear to the other and not being taken in. So I think, like anything, you should judge what's being said, not who's saying it, because that can sometimes make you have prejudices based on your own insecurities. So in life, you really should be seen as a vast knowledge, and learn from even your enemies. Not that you should have enemies, but not everyone's going to get along, because we clash with the way our thoughts are, and some people can actually talk it through where other people would rather not, and they would rather distance themselves and not have any conversation at all. But I say that, speak to as many people as you can and learn from as many people as you can and be as open as you can. So you yourself will learn and grow from that experience. Let someone else have the problems with you. If they disagree with things you said, that's their own views. You can't convince people to think the way you think. But if they listen to what you say and they take some of what you're saying and feel that you have some valid points, that to me is at least a sign of they're willing to take in what you're saying, and it's a positive thing. So as always, I think don't pretend you know something when you don't. Just if you feel like it's a dumb question, just ask the question, because it's better to admit you don't know something than pretend you do, because once you're stuck in the middle of your lie, you'll find yourself looking like the bigger fool than you were if you just said you didn't know something. Otherwise, look up on the internet and try and learn as much as you can then, and that will maybe stop you from asking some questions that you don't want to ask to people because you're embarrassed. But either way, I think it happens a lot where people don't want to learn. We're all teachers in some respect, and we're all students in some respects. So we can all learn from each other if we just respect each other enough to listen. So anyway, that's all I can babble on this episode, but we'll be posting every chance I get. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you join me in the next episode. It's Alex here again on Shop Before podcast. And if ever you want to, go on to lostmymind.com.au and have a gander at other stuff I've written and see what you think. Thank you. Thanks for joining me. and I'll see you on the next episode.